Indeed, Robert Nagila is in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. He joins us live from there. Robert, just recently, the two leaders agreed to promote smooth relations, but this seems not to be happening. What explains this shifting of positions?
Well, the situation between Sudan and Southern Sudan is one that caught very many people by surprise. You will recall it's barely 2 months since the oil taps were turned on from Southern Sudan, letting oil flow back into the north again. Now, Sudan's explanation is that they've been experiencing some technical hitches at Pump Station 2. Now, Pump Station 2 is the station that pumps oil from the south all the way into the north to Port Sudan. Now, Sudan says that this began on the 19th, that's over the weekend, and they say that they've been in contact with their counterparts in the south, explaining what the problem is. Now, of course, South Sudan is concerned that there's been a buildup of oil since then, and they're worried that if nothing happens and they're unable to get rid of this excess oil that's been building up or collecting, then they'd have to let it out, and that will cause an environmental catastrophe within their region. However, both sides trying to play it down, both sides saying that they are committed to the pact they signed, and it's important to note that President Bashir of Sudan and Salva Kiir of South Sudan are due here in the next 48 hours. Now, whether they'll meet on the sidelines, we're not sure yet, but I spoke to the Sudanese ambassador, and he said that they were hopeful that the two would meet at some point during the celebrations and discuss some of the issues, but they say that there's absolutely nothing to worry about, and both sides very committed to the pact.
And Robert, speaking of the historic AU summit there, what transpired at the session today?
Well, some of the things that have been taking place here today have to do with economic and social issues, but perhaps the biggest story coming out of the African Union today was the ICC question. Now, some of our viewers may not be aware, but in 2010, the African Union took a position and would not support the ICC when it came to seating presidents. Now, today, Uganda stood up and said that this position has been pending for quite a while, and they would like to see it discussed and done away with. Now, this position was also seconded by Southern Sudan. Now, it's important to note that there's also a status report that is due to come before the ministers, which is up for discussion, Penina. Now, immediately that comes up for discussion, it will then be handed over to the General Assembly, which is where the president sits. So, very clearly, 50 years since the African Union came into being, the ICC question very, very strong on the agenda, top on the agenda, with a lot of African countries pointing fingers at the ICC over the way they feel they've treated African countries. Now, here's a story by my colleague Jerome Chala over some of the events that have been going on here at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa.
It comprises ministers of foreign affairs of African member states, and its mandate is mainly to finalize the draft agenda of discussion among heads of states during the 21st summit. The Executive Council of African Union is holding its 23rd ordinary session here in Addis Ababa at the headquarters of the African Union Commission. At the opening ceremony of the Council's meeting, the chairperson of the Union's Commission, DR Dlamini Zuma, said the African security architecture helped the continent to achieve stability and even prevent conflicts from inception. She further said,
"We have taken the general approach that we must be bold and give a clear message to our people that as Africa, we can and will change our situation, that we can and will take charge of our destiny. For too long we've been told and believed that we are poor. And yet the entire world for the last 500 years have looked towards Africa during slavery, during colonialism, plundering our human and natural resources.
Members of the Executive Council, the Ministers of External Affairs and other ministers of AU member states will deliberate in closed session on the different reports of the ministerial meetings organized by the AU Commission during the last 6 months. They will consider the activity report of the Commission, the recommendations of the Permanent Representatives Committee on the implementation of previous decisions of the Executive Council and the Assembly, among other points.
Equally important is the need for reflection on our challenges and shortcomings as we mark this historic event. Obviously, the last 50 years have not been easy, and there were indeed so many ups and downs along the way.
Almost all of the speakers at the opening ceremony of the Executive Council's meeting had emphasized the significance of the former Organization of African Unity, from freeing Africa from the shackles of colonialism to taking the continent to the tower of economic growth. The contribution of OAU was immense. And now making continental transformation is the business at hand. Just not a transformation, but a structural transformation.
Allow me to mention some key strategic issues that need to be addressed in order to bring about the structural transformation of our continent. First of all, Africa needs to review the nature of its relations with all others in the international community. It means saying enough when any endeavor is not in favor of Africa. It means Africa first.
Now, the challenge is this. The heads of state of the continent should do rigorous planning of the coming 5 decades to achieve Agenda 2063 and above all sustain the economic growth of Africa. Many believe although the road to economic independence is going to be bumpy and might be full of challenge, Africa has what it takes to reclaim its own glory. Grumjala CCTV at the African Union headquarters, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Indeed, we are still putting the spotlight on the historic AU celebrations taking place in Ethiopia. CCTV's Robert Nagila is still live with us from Addis Ababa. Robert, what is coming up tomorrow?
I beg your pardon, Penina, I did not get you very clearly, but if you're talking about the events in the coming days, the deliberations by the foreign ministers will continue way into tomorrow, after which, of course, the recommendations will be presented, like I said, to the General Assembly, which consists of the presidents. Now, we expect the presidents, leaders of the African countries, about 75 leaders from Africa and outside the continent have been invited for the celebrations. We expect them to start coming in or arriving tomorrow evening, well into Friday. And of course, Saturday is the big one, the celebrations. Africa celebrating 50 years of the African Union, the organization that is to bring Africa together. And the big question, of course, after this will be what next for Africa in the next 50 years. Penina?
All right, Robert, thanks very much for those insights. CCTV's Robert Nagila live from Addis Ababa.